Are you Stephen the father?
Yes.
It's about the baby.
Yes.
Well, I don't quite know how to say this, but the baby just ran a few laps at the delivery room.
But he's only a few hours old.
It would appear he's quite advanced in his movements.
That's incredible.
There's one more thing.
Yes.
He's spoken his first word.
Already?
Yes.
What was it?
Well, it was one of our newer nurses, but she's pretty sure the baby said the word jog.
Hello, Harry here, and welcome to Jog On. As well as this podcast, Jog On also has a YouTube channel titled Jog On with Harry Morgan, releasing weekly running-themed videos, so go check it out. You can simply search the words Jog On and subscribe to the channel there. Now, before the episode begins, I'd just like to say a quick word about the podcast. As you may be able to imagine, it takes many hours to create a single episode, and having a full-time job, this means it can be difficult to release episodes as regularly as I would like. Taking on the video side of things, filming, editing, and publishing those on a weekly basis also means it can be tough to dedicate as much time as I'd like to this podcast. Because of this, I have recently made a decision. This is to drop a day per week at my full-time job so that I can have more time for Jog On, as it truly is my passion and I get great joy from bringing you guys these episodes. I don't earn anything from it, and I realise dropping down a day with the job will mean less funds. But, as I'm sure you have all come to learn, it is time that is the most precious resource of all. To help Jog On progress, I have set up a page where listeners or viewers, if they wish to, can make a donation to help support Jog On. Any funds will go straight back into the creation of episodes and videos. We also now have Jog On running tops, both technical and cotton, for men and women. If you would like one, I will put a link in the show notes to the website. It's another way to help the show. Thank you. There are a couple of people who sometimes help by giving me suggestions for future episodes, and to them I'm incredibly grateful, but at this time, Jog On is run solely by myself. If you would like to help out, all the relevant links will be in the show notes. I cannot thank you enough for listening and your continued support. I'm Harry. This is Jog On. It's episode time. If you look at a map of the United Kingdom, split into counties, and then slowly make your way towards the bottom left of the island, there are two final counties. These are Cornwall and Devon. Amongst these counties, the running scene feels a little different, often rural. One can find runners traversing the rugged land of Exmoor and Dartmoor, or jogging down the many miles of coastal paths, breathing in the salt air. Yet, in these distant counties, there is one man, himself a Devonian from birth, who discovered a remarkable gift for running long distances fast. Tom Merson holds speeds that for many of us are slightly head-scratching. He has broken arguably one of the most impressive barriers in road running, sub 30 minutes for 10k. His personal best at the time of this recording is 29:45. To put that into perspective, that is running every mile in 4:47, or every kilometre in 2:59. That's an average speed of 12.5 miles per hour. Put it this way, if you were cycling around Centre Parks, Tom, on foot, would overtake you. I became aware of Tom's local running club, Exmouth Harriers, as a few of them know about Jog On. I was put in contact with Tom, and before I knew it, we had a date in the diary to sit down in my parents' living room and talk. This is that conversation. We started by talking about him running alongside Olympic-level athletes.
It's fascinating because suddenly all these people you see on TV are actually on the road with you.
Try to bear in mind the calibre of athlete that Tom is. Never have I had a conversation in the history of this podcast where a guest had an anecdote about the lead car.
Yeah, there's a lot of building work going in Plymouth, so every time the lead car went through a dusty patch, it would sort of thrown up in your face.
I simply hadn't previously known anyone who's been in that position. On top of him inadvertently referring to the podcast...
Yeah, it wasn't a structured training session, it was solely just jogging on and just being outside. I really liked being outside.
I very much enjoyed talking to him and hearing his unique insight.
And not everyone appreciates that athletes would rather run a quick time and come 5th or 6th or 7th, but have that quick time under their belt than necessarily take the glory.
Towards the beginning of the conversation, I wanted to know how it all started out for him. So please, welcome to Jog On, Tom Merson.
Dad was a footballer. it's very easy to grow up through the school systems and everything, kicking a ball around the playground. So yeah, football and, riding your bike in the road, all sports, but competitively was always football. A little bit of rugby, a little bit of swimming, but football.
Looking back, do you think that whereas we now start to understand that actually footballers cover a fair few miles in one game, like it's actually quite a running-based sport, and you think about all the skills and the goals and the different positions, and actually there's a heck of a lot of running that goes on in football. Do you think actually that in a weird way you sort of were doing a lot of training? Did that create a foundation of fitness?
It must have, and certainly strength, because obviously you're doing all that running around on generally muddy pitches through the winter. You always warm up with a jog around the pitch, and as you become a runner and you start investing your time in trying to better yourself and improve your running, you end up doing intervals or stand on a football pitch and chase football around. That is an interval session in itself.
It is,
if you're lucky, the ball's at the other end of the field and you get a bit of recovery, but sometimes you're just jogging between sprints.
And did you notice that you could get to the ball quite quickly, or that you just weren't quite as tired? Was there any indication that maybe this running was something you had?
I've always had a massive engine, if you like, but I'm no speed demon. I think anyone who would listen to this could stand with me on a 100-metre line, and if that gun went, they'd probably be with me for the majority of it. Maybe through the 100-metre line I might pull away, and certainly as we went further round, but I think over 100 metres most people will have me.
So you're not a fast twitch guy?
Not at all.
But what you do have is an engine and an endurance. And for you, what is that starting distance, 5k, 10k, etc., where you start to think, this is me now, this is my game?
Yeah, so 5k is probably the shortest of it, where I can sort of hold that speed endurance, try and maintain sub 3-minute Ks for as long as possible.
For the old schoolers out there, sub 3-minute Ks is sub 450 miles. Yes, I know, my head hurts too.
In a perfect world, there'll be 250s.
At this point, I had to walk out in disgust. I'm kidding. What a runner.
But we're doing it on the road, and wind and slopes, etc., get in the way, so probably 5k and upwards. But I think the real secret is I don't tend to suffer too much when I'm running at 5-minute miles. So when I'm at 5-minute mile pace, I tend to be okay for the duration of whatever we're doing, and that can be a hilly race or a flat race. I tend to be okay, and I recover very quickly. And that seems to be one of the big secrets, is what is that pace that you're comfortable at? And for you, that number just happens to be quite a lot lower than the average person. What do you credit when you look back and you think about, I have this ability that puts me in a top percentile in the world? Do you think about all the training you've done? Do you think about, from a biological perspective, you've always just been quite comfortable with that engine? Like, what do you credit as the reason that you're able to run like this? I think I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. So you're running hard, you're stressing your body, you're feeling sort of under the weather most of it, but it doesn't seem to trouble me too much, doesn't put me off, doesn't make me want to stop. I quite enjoy that pain. And is that because something's happening in your head? Do you just have a mental ability to sort of zone out? Yeah, if it's zoning out, that becomes the new comfortable. You get yourself to that level and then you adjust back to it. Yeah, and you just think, right, okay, this is okay. Can I push on from here? Sometimes. Most of the time, no. But you get to a level where it's really uncomfortable and you, like you said, adapt to it and feel okay with it and try and sustain it for as long as you can. So you start out and the football goes on for a fair amount of time, and obviously had a great passion for this and had some success with it. When does that change happen from Tom the footballer to Tom the runner? I fell into it completely by accident. I was 21, 22. I started working. I bumped into a few friends who said, do you fancy coming along playing Saturday afternoons or Sunday mornings, etc. for these teams? I said, you know what, why not? And I started running to my football training. Okay. And a few people had seen me running to football training. They said, you run quite well. And I was like, thanks. But hadn't really thought any more of it. And then, because I was working at the same time, someone said, they'd seen me running and they said, would you consider running for a charity in the Great West? And I said, sure. Why not? Yeah. Anyway, got in on this charity place in my football socks, football shorts, pair of AstroTurfs, and a long-sleeved yellow T-shirt that the charity had given me. And I stood on the start line and I was listening to all the sort of chat, that's such and such. If you're still with him at halfway, you'll be okay. That was great, but who I was meant to sort of still look at halfway, I'd gone past him in the first 2 miles and didn't really know what to do. So I just kept grinding it out. Next is a hilly course. And I noticed that as I was going up the hills, everyone was coming back to me, all these club runners. Yeah. I got to the end in what a lot of people would be very pleased. 7th on that day? Yeah.
Just to give a bit more context to this day, the date is 30th of April 2006, and Tom, with no specific distance training, wearing football kit, ran in a field of 2,130 runners and came 7th. Not in the top half, not in the top 100, but 7th. He beat 99.67% of the field, whilst not even wearing running shoes. On a course with hills, he ran 1 hour, 17 minutes and 22 seconds that day. Phenomenal.
I'll never forget coming into the athletics track, coming in there, and I could hear my dad shouting from, that was the only voice I could hear.
Wow.
Because I think he was so bloody surprised that someone that doesn't run had suddenly come in top 10 in a 2,000 or 3,000 person race. Yeah, and looking quite comfortable, waving.
Yeah.
And that was it then. I did another one after that, and nothing for that year. And then I thought, I'm going to go start running. And I started jogging off the back of that. But I'll never forget, I did sort of 7-ish miles. It's my first run, and my body hadn't adapted to that pounding that you get when you start road running. My legs were in bits, but I guess it's a testament to my comfort with being uncomfortable. I did the same the next day, and I found out that after 10 days of being in agony, actually that went away. And then I carried on plodding through.
Body just kind of adapted, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a structured training session. It was solely just jogging on and just being outside. I really liked being outside.
From that race onwards where you placed 7th in the yellow top, does the bug bite from then on and it's just,
yeah,
I want to pursue this?
Yeah, well, it wasn't necessarily I want to pursue this because I didn't know where I would go with it. I just thought I really enjoyed that. That was quite good fun. So I suppose I got the bug for exercising, and I also got the bug for being out. Your town might be 10 miles circumference, but you can see all of that in just over an hour. If you go out for an hour and a half, how much further can you get? What can you see? There's a real exploration to being able to get out and run, and down in Devon we've got some beautiful places to go and see.
I think that's right. People forget that it's not just about the training and about pounding away and hurting your lungs, but actually there is a huge sense of exploration, like you say, to the running. And I've discovered cities whenever I move. The way I find out about that city or that town or that village is by just running around it a few times, and you find little paths and alleyways you never would find if it weren't for the running. And
sometimes you end up down a cul-de-sac and got to turn yourself around, but other times you see some of the most beautiful vistas that you could possibly hope to see, and you'll stumble across them completely by accident.
So what does a training week look like now, moving from, running around a football pitch? Obviously now you must have learned a lot about running and working out different training plans, and obviously you do some quite early runs. I know you do some 2 runs in a day type thing. What does an average training week look like now in your training schedule?
I work at the hospital. There is a shift involvement with that, so it tends to be around my shifts, but I find the easiest way is just, I'm going to start work at 8 a.m. I'll get my 10-mile run done in the morning. 5 a.m, alarm goes, I'll get up, I'll walk the dog for half an hour down the road, have a coffee or some water, depending how I'm feeling, and then I'll get out the door and just run. I've got a few different routes. This time of year it's much harder because obviously street lights don't tend to get turned on down here first thing in the morning. So a lot of it's road running this time of year, but in the summer it's beautiful. Coast path, common. That's typical, and I'll do that at least 4 to 5 days a week.
Yep.
So up to 50 miles bagged at a decent pace. My steady running isn't particularly slow, so a lot of it tends to be around 6-minute miling. When the wind's not in your face, it's that little bit quicker. When it's wind affected, you slow down slightly, but if we say 6-minute miling on the whole, you're running quite hard. Your heart and lungs are working well. And then off the back of that, ideally 2 interval sessions a week and hopefully a tempo.
And are these flat speed or are these hill tempo sessions?
So the tempos are always hilly because we live in a hilly area.
You've got a great area here.
Yeah. So I can't avoid some sort of hill.
Yeah.
And I think it only benefits me sometimes.
To your credit, exactly.
Especially in the races where you're starting to feel a little bit rubbish, but you've got that hidden strength to try and drag you along. So the tempo is always hilly, but the intervals are on a track, or there's a few stretches, not long stretches, but there's a few stretches where you can get 3, 4, 5-minute reps.
Hill climbing is a big one. It's almost like a skill within a runner's arsenal that some people neglect. And I, for example, lived for a long time in the city of Southampton, and it is pancake. And I think what happened was over the course of those years is I actually lost some fitness. Even though I was doing a fair bit of training, I was okay on the flat, but when I finally went and did a race and there was a hill, I saw the difference immediately. So I think for any runner, that adding of those hills in, especially tempo hills, is a staple part of any runner's diet. It sounds like been okay on the hills. You've been comfortable with them. Yeah,
very much so. Where I grew up, I was sandwiched between 2 hills. If I needed to get out on the bike, if I needed to walk to meet friends, it would involve walking up Tour of Britain standard climbs, King of the Mountain hills. So every morning, my run incorporates one of those hills, depending which way I decide to set out. If you run up it and then come down the other side, you've got to climb back up the same sort of elevation somewhere else along the route. Yeah, I've always enjoyed hills. They're a challenge. There's that famous quote, hills are speed work in disguise. The minute you start climbing, your form changes, you're up on your toes, and if you're trying to maintain your speed, you're working very, very hard to get up there.
Yeah, of course.
I guess there has been a natural hill talent because they'd closed the track at Exeter, so I decided to embark on the mountain running scene for a short period, and I got international vests off the back of that by training on the road. We've got Holden and Woodbury Common, so for trail runs and things, but they're not comparable to the lakes or dales, so I definitely got introduction to real hills, as the northern contingent would say. I held my own and I did pretty well. I got a couple of medals out of it, so yeah.
And now you've experimented with a bit of cross country, some work on the track, the road running, obviously, quite well known for. Is there a personal favourite of yours, something that you always go, if I had to carry on one discipline of all the running from cross country to trail running to road, what's the one that you would continue forward because you're most fond of it?
It's hard because my road running career, so to speak, has gained momentum in the last few years because, unfortunately, I've got hallux rigidus in my big toe on my right foot. So I've effectively got a fused big toe. So I cannot run cross-country properly. I can't run on the trails because it's absolute agony. I spend 3 days after these races hobbling around. But I love being off-road.
It kind of makes it worth it.
So I end up absolutely crippling myself just because you're out in the most beautiful places and it's really hard.
But you don't get this off the back of the road running.
No. So I'm quite lucky. It's not perfect. If I get into a sprint finish, I'll feel that. But for steady state running, I feel okay. But I manage it pretty well, and this has been a hell of a year, so I can't say that it's that detrimental.
Yeah.
But the minute I step off road, that instability, I can't guarantee that I can land on the outside of my feet when I run.
There's an unpredictable surface.
100%. So every now and again I do land awkwardly, which reminds me that I can't do this anymore. But it's annoying because I would still be running the fells. I'd still take a 6 or 8 hour drive up to the north to run some of the mountain races. I'd still look at the bigger cross countries, especially now I've learned how to train well. I'm in the best fitness of my life. It'd be lovely to get stuck into a cross country. I wouldn't contest a medal, but I'd be hopefully in the mix of maybe a top 20 or similar. But yeah, unfortunately the toe won't let me do that.
Has it meant that there have been many adaptations to your form since the toe thing? Or have you always just run the way you ran?
So I've always run with a similar sort of footfall, but I imagine there probably are some adaptations because your body does look after yourself. We will sort of compensate somehow. Yeah, I don't know because I feel all right and I run on my own, so I don't really see many people, but I would assume so because I've definitely noticed more fatigue on my left side when I run, but that's it.
It's interesting you just mentioned that you run quite a bit on your own. And obviously you are spending some time with training groups as well here and there. But what is that split like? How much is, almost as a percentage, how much is Tom by himself out running and how much is in a group?
Nearly all my training's on my own.
Is it?
There's an element of convenience.
Well, yeah, of course. Who's joining you at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, they're more than welcome to come out at 5, but I don't know if I'll be able to recruit many.
No. Nor the 6-minute miles. That's not too tempting
No,
either.
that's it. I mean, I'd love a training group as well, but it's just not available where I live, and the NHS isn't that reliable for getting me out on time, or the shifts change. My 8 to 6 can be an 8 to 9, 10 o'clock at night. That's the nature of it.
It's great that you have the motivation to be able to push yourself. A lot of people rely on having, Jeremy's 10 seconds quicker than me over a 10K. Yeah. They use that, compete off of each other.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic that you can actually do that all internally by yourself and push yourself that hard.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever find myself in a scenario where someone's at the track or something and they're doing a similar session, bumped into some of the collegiate athletes that are back at certain times of the year, and if they're doing K reps or whatever, brilliant, because I can drop in on that. I'll happily sacrifice myself at the front. On the plus side of that is I'm getting pushed along, and I'll find my sessions in that scenario much, much quicker. But they're not around all the time, and I get to the track as and when I can, and I go out for training when it's most suitable for me, so it's not that straightforward. I'd certainly probably go enjoy my longer runs more with someone to sort of chat about and point things out to and stuff like that, but I just love running, so I'll get out and I'll make the most of it. Yeah, I'm quite happy.
Club-wise, you've run for both Bristol and West AC and also at the moment Exmouth Harriers, two quite different clubs. Bristol and West AC, were you ever based up there or were you actually travelling from around the Devon area to compete for them?
Travelling, so I've never been outside of the area. Exmouth, born and bred, and been here for the entirety. So when Bristol became Bristol and West, Mike Down, who absolute fantastic chap, absolute legend amongst the running community, set about trying to improve the club and looking to recruit the best of the West. Cornish athletes, Devon athletes were sort of asked if they were interested in the higher level competition, and at the time I didn't know much about it, but I said yeah. It meant I could run in the National Cross, area championships, relays, etc. And it's fascinating because suddenly all these people you see on TV are actually on the road with you. It was an amazing time. And Exmouth's home. Exmouth Harriers have always been very supportive and they're a really friendly club. I quite enjoyed being able to run for them, and these results now are an Exmouth Harrier. If they don't last much longer, it's still lovely to have done it for my local club, my hometown.
Well, I think it's nice that they can be associated with your name as well, because off the back of a few finishing photos, they get the Exmouth Harriers written across the chest, and that's quite a nice thing.
Yeah, and for myself as well, to see me winning some of the bigger races, it is nice to have an Exmouth Harrier vest on.
No, it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about it earlier, and that association with Exmouth Harriers and being, as you say, born and bred, it does mean that your heart still lies here no matter where you go. Even if someone said, Tom, we're going to take you off to this camp in America, your actual heart is still left in the place where you grew up, and it's what you know. Has it ever come close to a point where you've considered a move for the running?
Not for me, but it's always been discussed and people have always suggested it. Yeah, I might benefit from it, but I'm a decent athlete. I've got some good times and, I'm doing all this around full-time work and life in general, but I still don't consider myself good enough to go for it. So I just enjoy the way I've got it. I think I've got a nice balance. I'm an elite athlete, volunteer beach lifeguard, ODP in the NHS. I'm having a good time juggling all those things, yeah.
And the irony is sometimes you see people make these changes, these adaptations, and they push for that next level, and they make the move, and all of a sudden they find themselves somewhere that they're not that familiar with, they're not that comfortable with, and that affects their mentality. And actually, sometimes their performance can go downhill because they're in an unhappier place, even though they've made the move to become better and get bigger times and move to the next level. So you never know. Maybe it wouldn't be that great for you from a mental standpoint.
No. You've got to be comfortable with everything that's going on, and you've got to be in a good place, because what you're about to embark on, if you're going to improve on already a good training base, you're going to be hurting yourself that little bit more. So you want creature comforts. But then I can't say for sure because I've not ever done it, but I certainly enjoy getting home and crashing out on the couch and the dog coming up, and yeah, there's
something very nice about that. So I ran for Bristol and West AC as a teenager. It was a great club. One thing I loved about Bristol and West AC was their kit, pure white with this big red band that goes around the middle. Yeah. We were speaking about finishing photos, and obviously there have been a few big wins with you in that vest as well. And speaking of those big wins, those tape-breaking moments, are there any that stand out? Is there a race where you really thought everything kind of came together and that's one of the ones you cherish the most as a memory?
There's always a few which you really enjoy, but the ones I always remember tend to be the ones that I've not really prepared for, like I finished a night shift or...
Like an unexpected sort of...
Yeah, and one of this year was Plymouth Half. Like I turned up off about 3 or 4 hours sleep, and I don't know, I didn't really know what was going on. As England and Masters qualifier, so there were lots of guys looking quite serious, and I was looking around, I didn't really recognise anyone, and I started in about the 3rd or 4th row back. It's quite a quick start now, Plymouth. I'd done it a few years previous, but hadn't run that exact course, and it's still hilly, but the first mile was quite quick, and I sort of bounded off, and suddenly I was at the lead, and then we went round a bend and down the slope, and I was about 50 metres clear, and my watch wasn't really playing ball. The sort of screen had gone a bit funny, so I didn't really know what I was running, but it felt comfortable. And then the watch came back to life at about 5 miles, and it was like 24:50. I was like, I'm going to regret this. I don't feel great. Yeah, there's a lot of building work going in Plymouth, so every time the lead car went through a dusty patch, it would sort of thrown up in your face. And I just kept plodding along. And before I know it, I'm getting to the hoe, and all I can see on the car is sort of 63:20. Or I'm not sure how much further I've got to go, but I know it's not far. And you start kicking on. And to cross the line in the time would have been lovely to go under 66 minutes, but to be nearly 66 minutes flat and run a PB on what is probably one of the toughest courses, well, you could argue, of the big road runs, it's probably the toughest in the county, but maybe it might extend further than that. So it definitely builds some confidence. But I'll never forget that one, because there's a photo of me sat on my backside, sort of, just obviously knackered, but just looking a bit shocked. And that was in the paper, and that's still my favourite photo. I think, like, if you come to my house, there's nothing running related in my house. You wouldn't know I was a runner. There might be a pair of trainers if they're stinking, but generally there's nothing running related. So you'll come in my house, and it's just a normal house. Yeah, if I was to put one photo up, it would be me sat on my backside after Plymouth, just looking absolutely broken.
You have to send that to me. That would be an interesting one to see.
Yeah, I will.
Why is your house so unrunning related? Is it a bit of an escapism thing? Is it just because everything else is running, so let's just not...
I don't want to say I'm not into it, because I am, but yeah, it's just nothing there. Like, there's no trophies out and about. All my trophies live in a box in the garage. I've got some medals which... as an older man, they might appear, but currently, I don't know, it's just a different person.
That's great. And what's quite nice then, I think, is that you don't identify so hard with the running. The concept of Tom the runner is not something that you probably hold in your head. It's just, all the things you do, and one of the things you happen to do is running. And I have spoken to some people, obviously this has given me the opportunity to speak to a lot of people who do, I think, associate quite hard with the running. And whenever they're injured, for example, that self-identity goes away a little bit, because, that's what they do. This is my thing. I think maybe one of the nice things about you from just talking to you now is it's quite clear that there's a lot of strings to your bow. There's not just this one big thing. For example, the lifeguarding, that gives you a bit of balance. When you had the toe injury, for example, were you able to stay fairly positive throughout it?
Yeah, I'll always find a way to exercise. Running's my favourite kind of exercise, but I'd always find an alternative, half decent on the bike. No doubt, if running had to stop, you might find me Cycle Sport Dynamo, the local the Exmouth club or similar. I would miss it. I'd miss it dreadfully. When the surgery was going on, I was very much unsure whether I'd be able to continue, but all I said to the surgeon is, if you can get it to a point where I could literally just go out for my jog every day, that would be sufficient. And the nice thing is, there are other strings to my bow, the lifeguard stuff. There's competition in that. There's a camaraderie with the working alongside them, and they're a massive part of the friendship group, but they're a friendship group which are very active. It's a lovely alternative, being competitive across my age group now. I'm an old man, because we become veterans at 30 in surf life savings.
Really?
So, yeah.
At 30?
Yeah, at 30. So,
Oh, God, that's going to make some people depressed.
Yeah. Although the downside is the guys who are 30 or between 30 and 32 generally are still as fit as the youngsters. So, yeah, they're pretty competitive. They just get to pick up a Masters medal as well as their senior medals sometimes.
You've mentioned the big three, obviously the running,
Mm-hmm.
the cycling you're pretty handy at. I'm guessing the swimming isn't such a strength, but at least you've got a bit of background with the surf lifeguarding. Has the chance of a triathlon ever entered the equation? Has that question mark ever come up?
I think you always entertain it, and triathlon's grown astronomically in the last 10 years really, and of course those triathletes sometimes come across into the running. London 10,000 this year, I was running around with Johnny Brownlee.
I was about to say Johnny Brownlee, pretty handy over a 10k.
He is, and a 5k. I can't say for sure I won't or I will, but we do a lot of safety cover at the triathlons courtesy of the lifeguards. The negative to it all is finding time for all that training.
I was just about to go on to that. I was
Yeah.
like, the fact you're already getting up at 5 a.m. and
Yeah.
all this just to fit the running in, try and take two other sports, and I mean that is a lot of dedication.
Yeah, and you're going to want to make as good an account of yourself as you can.
You want to make a fist of it, yeah.
And I imagine I'd probably be quite competitive in my mind.
I don't doubt it.
So who knows how brutal that sort of regime would have to become around the work and everything else.
Has it ever been on the cards that you could, to an extent, go part-time? So there are certain races that have a little bit of prize money with them and winning them, and you've been fortunate enough to win a bit of prize money. I'm guessing it's obviously not at a level where, you're sort of Farah Millions type deal, but when you get that first check for a race win, has it ever crossed the mind and thought, well, maybe I could just reduce my hours here a little bit and look at that?
Yeah, I live fairly frugally. It's always a possibility. I've just never considered it, and I'm probably, I don't know, it seems very serious that, doesn't it?
I know, it does. It's almost like having to admit, hang on, I'm taking this really seriously now.
There'd probably be more pressure on it to earn that money. Whereas now it's a lovely hobby which gets me some beer money or sometimes more. I like the fact that I can balance it around work. It's almost like that's my thing. Who knows? Marathons are a different ballgame, aren't they?
Absolutely. You've gone up to half marathon so far.
Uh-huh.
Is there the chance of seeing you at marathons soon? Is there a Tom plan to go up again in a couple of years?
Unfortunately, there's never really a plan. I tend to just plod through life fairly
Taking every day as it comes.
randomly. Yeah, I'll need one under my belt. And I've watched a lot of friends in the last 2 years especially run some absolutely amazing times and have some absolutely amazing performances. So I would like to think that it would be a waste with the current form I'm in and everything else not to try and build off it now and try and target one maybe in the next year or 18 months. I certainly would like to do it sooner because I am in such good form, and building off this foundation shouldn't be too difficult. And the danger is you wait too long, you get an injury and you can't even get back to the foundation you tried to start from. So yeah, 100% there'll be a marathon. It's just picking the right one, isn't it? There's so many. It's making sure you've got the right field to drag me along. And whether that's domestic or something in Europe, I've got no real plans, but I've not ruled anything out either. But I will have a marathon attempt.
And the beauty of running as fast as you do and having your ability is that it means there's just less barrier to entry to a lot of these races, whether it be an entry on an elite time. Certainly Good for Age is a very common one these days for a lot of the good club athletes at the very least. So that's a really nice thing that opens up all these doors. And I think you're right, capitalising on the form you're in now. It's the marathon's always it's the big M word that everyone always eventually goes to.
Yeah. You speak to a non-runner, their first question is, once they know you run, they might ask you about a local race, but once they've moved on from the local race, it's have you run London Marathon?
Yeah. Which must be quite frustrating because you've done all this stuff and it's like, well, that's not the be-all and end-all.
No, and in running terms, I suppose saying you're a sub 30-minute 10K is very much a massive thing to a lot of athletes, because there are some far more talented athletes than me that might never quite make that time. Yeah, to then get asked, have you ever run London? You sort of think, I have to get on and do that then.
Just like an answer, yes, I've run it.
Yeah, I have.
Just to keep people like you happy.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't define me.
No, that's it. I'll have a marathon to talk about.
We briefly touched on, you used that word pressure, and the vast majority of people who listen to this will be very, very keen, they train hard, but they're just not producing the numbers you're producing. And so it's a world they can't quite see into. You have this slightly different perspective getting to be running the way you do. What is it like to have won a race and then be going back to it the next year? Is there that sense of almost like just to turn up, people go, oh, Tom will win that? How do you handle that expectation?
I think you put pressure on yourself anyway. You know, you want to repeat it. It certainly looks better on you if you manage it 2 years on the trot, especially as you're effectively taking on all comers once you've won it the previous year and you don't know who's going to turn up. That's the joy of running. We might be tucked down here in Devon, but we have the potential for anyone to come down because this is a holiday destination. So certainly through key school holiday periods, summer holidays especially, anyone can turn up. That's the joy of running. It's racing. And not everyone appreciates that athletes would rather run a quick time and come 5th or 6th or 7th, but have that quick time under their belt than necessarily take the glory. If I win race X this year, well, if I don't contest race X next year, that's someone else's crown. But if I win race X this year in a course record, that course record never gets forgotten. That's the joy of running, is we're striving to run the quickest times we can. So then when we're old men sat in a pub, banter with each other about who ran quicker over what distance and enjoy that. There is always a pressure, and I always want to do the best I can.
Taking a course record is at least a pretty good reason to go down and have that thing to beat, and that's what you're chasing. I was in conversation with a very good athlete a while back who works for the shoe company Saucony, a guy called Callum. A phenomenal runner, has gone sub 15 on a number of occasions, and he's 19 years old, so he's got a lot of potential. He and I were discussing Parkrun briefly when I was with him. The average run on the street would think or imagine that someone who's running that quickly would just love to turn up every Saturday and just smash Parkrun. But he said it gets to a point where it's not quite that enjoyable, because there's many parkruns he would do where he'd win it by 4 or 5 minutes sometimes, because the winning times can be in the 19s on some local parkruns around the UK. So for you and something like Parkrun, does that challenge sometimes have to come more in, well, I see the course record here, is you must have found yourself at some points like, I'm not running with anyone. This isn't actually quite as enjoyable as possibly I thought it was. Can you relate to what he was talking about?
100%. It's very tough to try and hold pace or stay on pace when you are 2-3 minutes potentially more clear over the longer races, especially, you know. And bringing up Parkrun. So Parkrun is arguably, since its incarnation, one of the best things for people's fitness and getting people out and about, bringing the profile of running up to where it is currently. Like, it's an amazing tool. And I think it's great that the good athletes turn up to it and run quick, and sometimes a few good athletes turn up and they get a race in. But it's certainly not something necessarily to enjoy winning, because there's not as much kudos to it.
Yeah, and it would lose its potency if you just turned up every...
Yeah.
If you went and won a parkrun 6 times in a row.
I think as a training tool, parkrun's amazing. I don't run parkrun very often. Exmouth is the main one that I'll do. Killerton used to be the old one on the National Trust estate. You can use it as training. Like, it's a great 5k route, which is accurately measured and timed. So I'll turn up and do 15 minutes tempo parkrun, and then 15 minutes tempo afterwards. You know, what a session.
Yeah.
Great endurance session with a really, hopefully, sharp 5k in the middle of it. Other times I might do parkrun to start and then get to the cricket pitch or Exmouth sort of cinder track at the rugby club and do some reps.
I think it does actually give people a little more perspective when someone is running a great time, how great it is, because people are starting to get a little more engaged with times, and they know what a sub 20 means, and they know what a sub 25 means, and they know what a sub 15 means. That they have an understanding of those parameters and those actual numerical values, and I think that's quite a nice thing. Have you experienced people coming up to you at a race before who are aware of who you are? Have you had any of that sort of, hi Tom, nice to meet you? Like, have you experienced that? And is that a weird feeling?
So yes, and it's lovely. It's quite flattering, because on paper I'm an athlete, but mentally I feel like a real bloody fraud sometimes when I'm still on the line against some of these very decorated and talented athletes. People stop me in the town. At the Midnight Barrel, someone stopped me and said, "Oh, are you Tom Merson?" I go, yeah. You know, and feeling slightly confused as to what was about to happen next. But yeah, running's been an amazing thing for that, because I never got the same thing from any of the other sports I was involved in, even at a very good level. I think that's what's lovely about running as well, is everyone in the race or parkrun is doing their own thing for themselves. And my 14:30 5k is the equivalent to someone's 30-minute 5k. It's all the same. Like, we've all got our own, like, it hurts them just as much as it hurts me. It's quite humbling. the amount of different people doing it for different reasons, or you might have different ailments. The running community on a whole is amazing. I appreciate we're all too knackered to be rude.
It's a weird thing with running. You do find when people get tired, they're quite genuine and honest. And And there is that bonding. Take two people and they've run 7 minutes difference over a 5K, which is a big chunk. But there's still this relatability that you've still gone through the same experience, you covered the same distance. And so there is that. I don't know, you've done it where you shake hands with people over the finish line and there's just something, there's a bit of a connection there.
Yeah, 100%. You can get epic with it and go, we're off to battle sort of thing every time you toe the line. And yeah, we've endured what that course has thrown at us. And if we've endured it in 66 minutes or we've endured it in 2 hours, we've still gone through the same things and some of the same feelings. We've all achieved the same, and we've all hurt just as much as each other. And if you can't appreciate that, you're missing out on the real joy of this sport.
One of the things that's interesting about you as a runner is when you look at that elite lineup and start, there's no denying it. There are biological gifts that some people have been granted. A lot of these guys are like 5'7", 55 kilograms. You're, whilst by no means a bodybuilder or anything like that, there's a noticeable difference that you are a little bit taller and you also look like the kind of person who does put on a bit of muscle quite easily. How have you managed that, and does that mean that whenever you do any gym work, you're being quite careful to maintain a certain leanness?
It is just your natural build, isn't it? And sometimes I do see myself stood in a lineup with other athletes or on podiums, and I surf too much, I swim a bit too much, or maybe garden too enthusiastically, where everything becomes a workout. And and there are other times where I see a photo of myself and think, yeah, my arms look all right. For no gym work, I'll take that. But when I start plateauing as I'm moving forward now, because I still believe there's a little bit more for me to give over 10k and a half. Once I get there, then I might consider other options. But realistically, I eat well. I'm quite happy in my build. Yeah, I don't really think too much about it.
Which is probably the right thing to do, because there comes a point when you can't shave off 15 kilograms, you'd just be unhealthy. And what's nice, I think, is because you have a slightly bigger frame, I think you have got a really good engine in there, because there's a limit to how big your engine can be when you are a certain size. There's a video on YouTube, it's not a very well-known video, but I came across it from 2017. I think it was extra 10K, and you're coming in and you break the tape. And I noticed you have quite a powerful style, and I kind of all of a sudden that ever so slightly bigger frame than your average elite level runner, it made a lot of sense. And I was like, oh, he's quite a powerful runner. He's pumping your arms quite hard. There was a nice synchronicity to your movement, and you look quite strong. Maybe it works to your benefit, and certainly put the hammer down, you've got that extra momentum, and certainly downhills. There goes Tom Merson.
Gravity. Yeah. I mean, we are different builds, and I think it's not so noticeable on the road. Certain guys are strong athletes, other guys are just lightweight, efficient. I could be more efficient in some of my movements, but carrying shoulders and chest and arms unintentionally, it becomes that little bit harder. And I think it's most noticeable when you're on the country, on the mud. You're following these little lean guys, and they literally tiptoe and float across the really wet, claggy sections. And suddenly my size 12 foot goes into a puddle, and it takes immense quad strength to pull it back out, whereas they seem to just glide across the top of it. But then it plays to my strength, because those guys don't get up the hills as quickly as me, because I'm pumping my arms and my legs are that little bit bigger.
Yeah, there's some strength work that comes in there.
Yeah, and that's my natural thing. But then those guys are often a little bit quicker on the flat.
In that training week that we talked about, is there much in the schedule in the way of some core strength and some bodyweight exercises? Do you play around much with that in your training?
So I always say I will.
Well, they're not as fun. At the end of the day, get down, do a few push-ups and some core work. It's not as fun as going out and blasting a 10-miler.
No, absolutely. It's hard, and I'm definitely more inclined to do the strength work than I am the stretching, which I know is equally important. I'm trying to get better at it all the time, but I'm in no way a role model for it. With the other sports that I like, and not so much the cycling, but certainly the surf lifesaving, there's lots of movements and exercises involved that maybe ticks my strength and conditioning box without having to do a standalone gym session. And it's certainly more interesting taking yourself off for a swim or taking one of the rescue boards out for a 2 or 3 mile paddle. Actually, that's quite nice. I think physically, I get a lot of my strength work out of the other things, but then there are some other movements which I do try and incorporate or have in intentions to.
You mentioned on that first race coming in 7th place and this kind of shock, or where did it come from, Tom Can Run discovery, that your dad was shouting, you can hear it over the top. And it was making me think about the family in general. Is there any background in your family of runners or running? Have you just come out of nowhere?
The family's always been a fairly talented sporting family, but as far as running goes, I'm the one and only to my knowledge.
Yep.
And I think off the back of my success, you just don't know what sports you might be very good at. And we don't necessarily get the opportunity, at schools or various clubs in your area. You might not find the opportunity to get stuck in to this obscure sport, which you don't know, you could be a world beater at. That's fascinating. It's just a shame that lots of people will plod through life and unfortunately miss their opportunity if they're so inclined to do well in sport that they could become a fantastic athlete in a certain sport that would never have crossed their path. But running's very much been, I fell into it by accident, but I certainly have no plans to climb back out of it.
I always like the idea that a person who it's different when you have something like handball where there's all these set rules and everything, but running, I always say, is this pure, raw, natural thing. That I always like the idea that if someone really had an ability at running, like yourself, eventually they will get there, because at some point they're going to be running for a bus or something and just something feels right. For example, you talk about coming quite late to the party to it, but even running to football training, there's still that positive association with running that it's comfortable enough for you to do that, because a lot of people will go, I'm taking a car.
That. Yeah. I think the joy of running is it's your simplest exercise, isn't it? Plenty of books around it and things like that. In our most primitive form, we are runners. Everyone has the ability to do it, but I suppose it's how hard you want to push yourself. That's when you get into what creates the couch to 5Kers, the good club athletes, the elites, and then the people that you'll watch on TV doing incredible things. That willingness to hurt yourself is what changes it, but everyone has the ability to be a runner. I'm just fortunate that I found my sport, and the plus side of coming to it late to the party is I haven't gone through growing stages or anything like that, so I haven't had the injuries that other people might have had.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because you can take the idea that if you've run since you're 11 years old, and I do believe that you create this great foundation. It sounds like because you were so active, you were pretty much doing that anyway, even if it wasn't running specific because of all the football, etc. But one of the disadvantages, and I have actually been privy to a couple of conversations with people who have said this might be a thing, is that you get pushed really hard as a kid if you show some promise, and then later on you hit sort of 24, 25 and things are starting to go here and there, and you wonder, like, during that developmental stage, should they have laid off it a little bit? So it's interesting, maybe you got the perfect balance.
Yeah, maybe. I certainly getting kicked to bits on the football pitch.
Yeah, slide tackle is not great.
I've been fairly robust, plodding through, with the exception of my toe mentioned much earlier. I haven't had too many problems, and touch wood, we don't see any more moving forward. But yeah, as you're growing up, your body's doing different things, and as you're a younger adult, you don't always have the great understanding of nutrition and things like that. So sometimes finding what works best for you, which I'm a big believer in, eat what works for yourself as opposed to, what the local influencer might suggest. You might well do well off it. So by all means try it, but bear in mind that it's horses for courses and we are all very different individuals. So you might find fish and chips as your golden food. It might be unlikely, but you just don't know, do you?
10 milers, that's a distance that people aren't quite as familiar with.
Yeah.
10K, half, 5K, marathon are the golden four, if you like. And now ultra is getting more and more into the conversation. But 10 miles is a weird one. It's actually a really nice race, and one of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest, is Great South Run down in Portsmouth. Is that a distance that suits you? Is it something that you've quite enjoyed?
I really enjoy it because sometimes you get to the end of the 10K and not being a speed demon, I don't have much change of pace.
Right.
And I'm a strong athlete, so quite often I'll get to the end of a 10K and I could run, Telford would be a good example. I crossed that line and felt absolutely fine. I had not necessarily more to go as far as speed, because unfortunately my speed doesn't change, but maybe I could have carried that pace on through. But I doubt I would have made it to a half. But I would have liked to have seen if I could have made it to 10. And I did say that to a couple of guys afterwards. I said, if this had been a 10 miler today, I could have gone quite quick. There aren't many 10-mile races around. The Great South is a big key one. The local one to us is Bideford, which is a great course, but unfortunately this year was flooded in a couple of places, which...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, which damages your time. I went...
When you have to swim part way.
Well, it was about 200 metres of knee-deep water, so...
Heck. Yeah, that will affect your PB.
Which was about 4 degrees, it felt like, so... It was quite a nice day, but I hit that water at about 7 miles, and I'd gone through 10K in 30-40, so I was moving well. But I hit that water, and it felt like someone else has strapped their legs to me when I got through the other side of the puddle. I couldn't run. Then I noticed second place was coming back at me, so I sort of switched something back on and managed to escape. It certainly damaged my time considerably, and I've run so much quicker through 5 miles and 10 miles in half marathons and 10Ks. So it'd be lovely to find a 10K, and maybe it'll be the Great South next year, where I can put one of those times in the bank. I've run sub 50 a number of times through half marathons.
Well, exactly, but the official 10-mile PB I had down as 50:42.
Yeah.
So it should be there to do that. You just need everything come together in that correct race where it's not flooded and you're not...
Yeah, find the right race, right time of year, and get it done. I should be able to do that, but I'd need to do it fairly soon because... You just don't know what's around the corner. But you can always look at your times and say, well, maybe there's a bit more there.
Mm. We talked about the marathon and the idea of moving up to that distance just to shut a few people up, just to get London done. What does the next few years look like? I know you're not a big planner, but what are some of the future goals, some of the boxes you'd still like to tick perhaps whilst you can and whilst you're at this stage of running?
I believe there's a little bit more in me for a half and 10k, so it'll be tick those boxes, get a marathon done, and hopefully a marathon that I can be proud of. If not, look for the next one.
Yeah.
But after that, just keep enjoying it. Like, you know, I feel like I'm riding a wave at the moment, and it's a real wave of success, and it's lovely. But at some point, either it's going to close out or I'm going to fall off it, and I'll just ride it for as long as I can and keep plodding away. I'm just relishing this sort of experience at the moment.
And I think that's quite key, to relish it, as you say, and to make the most of it, because it is such a time-specific thing. Like, one day you'll be 50. It's very easy to get quite down if a performance doesn't go quite well, but one day you'll look back and be like, well, hang on, I still just ran a 106 or whatever, and be like, oh, that was still... So I think it's quite important to remember the relative youth that you and I, for example, have, whilst we still can do it. So, well, Tom, that's been excellent. I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you so much for speaking to me. It's nice to chat to someone who is as humble as yourself whilst putting out times that to most people are pretty insane. So yeah, just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Harry here. Thank you for listening to this episode of Jog On. If you enjoyed it and know someone who would as well, please do share it with them, as it really helps us to grow. As always, thank you for your continued support. Timely though they are, I love creating and sharing these episodes, and if you're new to the podcast, a warm welcome to the Jog On crew. See links in the show notes if you'd like to help out. Search for Jog On with Harry Morgan in YouTube. It's incredibly exciting every time we get a new subscriber to the videos, and we just hit our 280th subscriber, which is awesome. You can follow us on Instagram at Jog On Podcast, and if you have a guest in mind, get in contact by emailing thisisjogon@gmail.com. I'm Harry Morgan, go for that run, and this is Jog On.